It was Christmas week. The lights were on, the carols were playing, and the town was pretending everything was warm. A 47-year-old biker, worn down by life and war, shut off his Harley at a Christmas market, planning to stay just long enough to disappear again. Then he saw it. A single mother on her knees in the snow, cookies scattered, laughter louder than the wind. And before anyone stepped in, a retired special service dog calmly sat between her and the crowd. The biker didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch anyone. On a night built on miracles, he chose the hardest one of all. The city of Ridgeway always looked harsher in winter. It was a small, working-class town, tucked between a river and an old industrial highway, the kind of place people passed through without stopping, unless they had family there or nowhere else to go. In December, the streets narrowed under layers of half-melted snow and gray slush, and the air carried a sharp cold that bit through jackets that had already seen too many winters. That night, the temperature hovered just above freezing, but the wind made it feel much colder. It pushed down Main Street in steady gusts, rattling the metal street signs and shaking the strings of Christmas lights hung from lamppost to lamppost. The lights still glowed warmly, reds, greens, and golds, but their cheer felt thin, like a smile held too long. Most people hurried, shoulders hunched, hands shoved deep into pockets, heads down. That was when the sound of a Harley-Davidson rolled into the street. It wasn't loud in a flashy way, it was heavy, steady. A deep, uneven rumble that felt older than the buildings it passed, like a heartbeat that refused to quit. Heads turned as the bike slowed near the curb, its chrome dulled by years of salt and weather. The rider cut the engine and let the silence settle. Jack Miller, 47 years old, swung one leg off the bike with the careful ease of a man who knew his body well enough to respect its limits. He was tall but slightly stooped, broad-shouldered beneath a worn leather jacket that had faded to a soft brown. His face was lined, not from age alone, but from long nights, early mornings, and years spent carrying more than most people could see. His hair was dark with streaks of gray at the temples, kept short and practical. A trimmed beard framed his jaw, neat but not polished. Jack looked like someone who didn't spend time in mirrors. His eyes were calm, observant, the kind that noticed exits, weather changes, and people who didn't want to be noticed. Behind him, perched calmly on a custom seat bolted to the back of the Harley, sat Bevgy. Bevgy was a Belgian Malinois, lean and powerful without looking aggressive. His coat was a mix of warm tan and deep black, clean despite the winter mess. His ears stood alert but relaxed, and his amber eyes tracked the street with quiet intelligence. A faded service harness rested across his chest, not flashy, just functional, bearing the marks of long use. Bevgy didn't bark, he didn't whine, he simply watched. Jack reached back, resting a gloved hand briefly on the dog's shoulder. Bevgy leaned into the touch, grounding and familiar. They had done this 1,000 times. The bike, the stop, the pause before moving again. Jack checked his phone. One delivery left. A box of donated supplies from a community warehouse to a temporary holiday market set up 3 blocks down. The pay wasn't much, but it covered groceries and a prescription refill waiting at the pharmacy. That was enough reason to keep going. As he walked the bike forward and parked near the market, Jack noticed the smell first: fresh bread, sugar, cinnamon. The Ridgeway Christmas market wasn't big. A handful of wooden stalls lined the square, decorated with garlands and battery-powered lanterns. Local vendors sold handmade crafts, scarves, and baked goods. A volunteer choir sang softly near the fountain, their breath visible in the cold air. Near the edge of the square stood a small table covered with a red and white checkered cloth, and behind it stood Emily Carter. Emily was 34, with light brown hair pulled back into a loose ponytail that had clearly been done in a hurry. Strands escaped and framed a tired but gentle face. She wore a thick wool coat that didn't quite close all the way, layered over a sweater that had seen better years. Her hands were red from the cold as she adjusted boxes of homemade cookies arranged in careful rows. A hand-lettered sign taped to the front of the table read, "Homemade cookies, 2 each, thank you." Emily's posture was polite, hopeful, and guarded all at once. The posture of someone asking for help without wanting pity. Jack noticed her smile first. It came quickly and disappeared just as fast whenever people passed without stopping. Then he noticed the group approaching. 3 young men, late teens or early 20s, dressed in expensive winter jackets that still looked new. They laughed loudly, voices carrying across the square. One of them nudged the other and pointed toward Emily's table. Jack slowed his steps. The young men stopped in front of Emily. One leaned forward, reading the sign with exaggerated interest. $2 for cookies, he said, smirking. Must be some special cookies. Emily straightened slightly. They're homemade, she replied evenly. Chocolate chip and oatmeal. You're welcome to try one. Another laughed. You sure people buy this stuff? Before Emily could answer, the third brushed past the table too closely. His elbow caught the edge. The table wobbled. A box tipped. Cookies spilled onto the slushy ground. Oh, sorry, the young man said, not sounding sorry at all. Emily froze for half a second. Then she knelt, quickly reaching for the fallen box, her movement stiff and embarrassed. It's okay, she said quietly, though her voice shook. Please just watch the table. One of them snorted. Relax, it's just cookies. Jack stopped moving. He didn't rush, he didn't shout. He simply stepped forward and stood beside the table. Bev Guy sat at his heel, posture straight, eyes calm but focused. Jack's presence shifted the space. He was close enough to block the wind and tall enough to be noticed. His jacket creaked softly as he crossed his arms, not aggressively, just solidly. The laughter faded. Evening, Jack said, voice low and steady. Market's crowded. Happens. The young men looked at him, then at Bevgy. Something in their confidence softened, not from fear, but from uncertainty. Jack wasn't angry. He was unmoved. One shrugged. Whatever, man. They walked away, laughter quieter this time. Emily exhaled slowly, only then realizing she'd been holding her breath. Jack crouched and picked up the fallen box, brushing slush from the bottom before setting it aside. You got a towel? He asked gently. Emily nodded, fumbling in a bag beneath the table. She handed him a clean cloth. Their fingers brushed briefly, cold, hesitant. Thank you, she said. I'm sorry, I didn't... You don't have to explain, Jack replied. Wind's rough tonight. He helped her straighten the table. Bevgy remained seated, watching Emily with quiet curiosity. When she glanced down, the dog's tail gave a slow, reassuring wag. He's beautiful, Emily said softly. Bevgy, Jack replied. He keeps me honest. Emily smiled, small but real this time. As Jack stepped back toward his bike, he glanced once more at the table, the cookies, the woman standing behind them, with stubborn hope in her eyes. He didn't know it yet, but the night had already changed direction, and the engine, when it roared back to life, didn't sound alone anymore. The market didn't suddenly feel warmer after Jack stepped away. The wind was still there, pushing through the square, slipping under coats and between thoughts. The Christmas lights still flickered. People still passed by with their bags and conversations. Life continued exactly as it had a moment before. But for Emily Carter, something subtle had shifted. She stood behind her table, hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, watching the spot where the biker and his dog had disappeared. The space they left behind felt oddly steady, as if the air itself had learned how to hold its breath. She shook her head at herself and looked down at the cookies. A few boxes were gone now, ruined by slush and footprints. She pushed them aside and rearranged what was left, straightening each row with careful attention. The sign on the front of the table had come loose again, one corner peeling away from the tape. She pressed it flat and smoothed it with her palm. Homemade cookies, it read, the letters slightly uneven but neat. She had practiced that handwriting late at night at her kitchen table, after her son had gone to bed, wanting it to look professional, wanting it to look like she belonged here. Emily glanced around the square. No one was laughing anymore. No one was staring. A woman with a scarf stopped, hesitated, then picked up a bag. Emily smiled, thanked her, and made the change with fingers that still trembled slightly from the cold, and from something else she couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or the strange awareness of being seen. Jack didn't go far. He parked the Harley at the edge of the square and leaned against a lamppost, arms crossed loosely over his chest. Bevgy sat beside him, calm and watchful, tail curled neatly around his paws. Jack pretended to check his phone again, but his eyes drifted back toward Emily's table. He wasn't staring. He never did. He was just making sure. Old habits, the kind that stayed long after the uniform was folded away. He noticed the way she kept glancing at the ground, as if expecting something else to fall. He noticed how she smiled a second longer than necessary when someone approached, like she was trying to reassure herself as much as the customer. She's tired, Jack murmured under his breath. Bevgy's ears flicked at the sound of his voice, then settled again. The dog's gaze remained fixed on Emily, steady and curious. Not protective, not suspicious, interested. "That's a first," Jack said quietly. Bevgy didn't react, but his tail gave a small, slow wag. Jack stayed there until his delivery confirmation buzzed on his phone. He sighed, pushed himself off the lamppost, and walked back toward the Harley. Before he mounted the bike, he reached into the side compartment and pulled out a folded cloth, clean, thick, still smelling faintly of laundry soap. He hesitated, then he turned back. Emily was counting change when she noticed the shadow fall across her table. She looked up, startled, then relaxed when she saw Jack standing there again. He held out the cloth without ceremony. "Extra towel," he said, "for the table, or your hands." Emily blinked, then smiled. "Thank you. I appreciate that." She took it, rubbing her fingers against the fabric. The warmth surprised her. Jack nodded once. "Market gets long. Cold doesn't help." "No," Emily agreed softly. "It really doesn't." There was an awkward pause, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Two people standing at the edge of the conversation, unsure which direction it was supposed to go. Bevgy shifted slightly, stepping closer to the table. He sat, posture polite, eyes level with Emily's knees. He looked up at her, head tilted just a fraction. "Oh," Emily said, crouching instinctively. "Hi." She reached out, slow and careful. Bevgy didn't flinch. He leaned forward just enough to meet her hand, warm nose brushing her knuckles. "He's very calm," Emily said. "Retired," Jack replied. "Earned it." Emily smiled at that. "I think we all deserve that eventually." Jack's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Emily," she added after a moment. "By the way, Jack." They shook hands briefly, firm and respectful. "Is he—" Emily gestured to Bevgy. "Belgian Malinois," Jack said. "Name's Bevgy." "He feels very present," Emily said, searching for the word. "Like he's really here." Jack looked at the dog, then back at Emily. "He's good at that." Emily nodded, as if that made perfect sense. A gust of wind whipped through the square, rattling the sign again. Emily caught it before it fell this time. Jack glanced at the boxes. "You been out here long?" "Since noon," Emily said. "I work mornings at the library. Well, used to." She stopped herself, then shrugged lightly. "They cut my hours, so I bake." Jack absorbed that without comment. "It's for my son," she added, almost apologetically. "School stuff. Kids make you do things," Jack said simply. Emily laughed softly. "Yes, they really do." Another customer approached, and Jack stepped back instinctively, giving her space. He didn't linger. He never did. As he turned to leave, Emily spoke again. "Hey, Jack?" He paused. "Thank you for earlier." Jack nodded. "You didn't do anything wrong." She watched him walk away, Bevgy glancing back once before following. This time, Emily didn't feel like she was standing alone. The ride home was quiet. The Harley's engine cut through the night, steady and familiar, but Jack's thoughts wandered. They didn't usually. He preferred them organized, contained. But the image of Emily kneeling in the slush kept replaying, her shoulders drawn inward, her voice polite even as she apologized for something that wasn't her fault. It bothered him. Not in an angry way, in a deeper, heavier way. He pulled into the narrow driveway of his small rental house, cut the engine, and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the handlebars. The porch light flickered on automatically, illuminating the peeling paint and cracked steps. Home was a generous word for the place. It was clean, quiet, temporary. Inside, Bevgy drank water while Jack shrugged off his jacket. The house smelled faintly of motor oil and old coffee. A calendar hung crookedly on the wall, still turned to last month. Jack sat at the small kitchen table and stared at nothing. "Don't," he muttered to himself. Bevgy patted over and rested his head against Jack's knee. Jack exhaled slowly and rested his hand on the dog's head, fingers moving through familiar fur. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Bevgy's tail thumped once against the floor. The next morning, Ridgway woke under a blanket of gray cloud. Snow threatened, but never quite arrived. The air felt heavy, damp, and cold in a way that sank into bones. Emily stood in her kitchen, measuring flour with careful precision. The room was small but tidy, filled with the quiet hum of an old refrigerator and the faint sound of a cartoon playing in the other room. "Noah," she called. "Shoes." "I have them," came the reply, followed by the unmistakable sound of something being dropped. Emily smiled despite herself. Noah Carter was 6, small for his age, with dark curls and an earnest seriousness that made him seem older than he was. He appeared in the doorway wearing one shoe and holding the other, his backpack dragging on the floor behind him. "Mom," he said, eyes wide, "can I bring my blue notebook today?" Emily hesitated. "That's for home." "I want to show Mrs. Lang my drawing," Noah insisted. Emily sighed, then nodded. "Okay, but be careful." As Noah rushed off, Emily turned back to the counter. The cookies had sold better than she expected last night, even after the spill. She counted the cash twice, then tucked it carefully into an envelope labeled "School." She grabbed her coat, glanced at the clock, and hustled Noah out the door. At the end of the street, a familiar shape waited. A Harley. Emily slowed. Jack stood beside it, helmet in hand. Bev Guy sat patiently at his side. "Oh," Emily said, surprised. "Hi," Jack nodded. "Morning." "What are you doing here?" she asked, then immediately regretted how that sounded. "I mean, not like—" Jack raised a hand gently. "Delivery nearby. Figured I'd check if your table survived the night." Emily laughed softly, relief flooding her expression. "It did. Thank you." Noah stared openly at Bevgy. "Mom," he whispered, "that's a police dog." Bevgy tilted his head. "He's not working anymore," Jack said, "but he still listens better than I do." Noah giggled. Emily felt something warm settle in her chest. Jack glanced at the time. "You heading out?" "Yes," Emily said. "School," Jack nodded toward Noah. "He walk?" "Usually," Emily replied. "It's just 2 blocks." Jack hesitated, then spoke. "You want company?" Emily looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines on his face, the care in his eyes. The way Bevgy sat like this moment mattered. "Yes," she said, "I think I would." And so they walked, not rushed, not heavy, just 3 figures moving through a cold morning, sharing the quiet without needing to fill it. Some things didn't need words to stay. Ridgeway never slept deeply. Even in the quiet hours between night and morning, there was always something humming in the background. The distant highway, a train horn drifting across the river, the low buzz of streetlights fighting the dark. It was the kind of town that stayed half awake, like it was afraid that if it ever fully rested, something important might slip away. Jack noticed these things more than most people. He noticed them because he had learned, long ago, what happened when you stopped paying attention. That morning, after walking Emily and Noah to school, Jack rode slowly back toward the center of town. The Harley moved beneath him with familiar weight, steady and honest. Bev Guy sat behind him, balanced and alert, the rhythm of the ride as natural to him as breathing. Jack didn't head home. Instead, he turned down a side street lined with brick buildings that had once been factories and were now something else. Storage units, repair shops, places that survived by changing just enough to keep going. He parked in front of a small diner with fogged-up windows and a flickering neon sign that read, "Open," even when it clearly wasn't sure it meant it. Jack cut the engine and sat still for a moment. Bevgy waited. "You hungry?" Jack asked quietly. Bevgy's ears lifted. Jack smiled faintly. Inside the diner, the heat hit them immediately. It wasn't clean heat, more like the heavy warmth of old radiators and overworked coffee machines, but it was welcome. The place smelled like bacon grease, burnt toast, and strong coffee. Only a few tables were occupied. A pair of construction workers hunched over plates of eggs. An older woman sat alone near the window, staring into her mug like it held answers she didn't expect to find. The waitress looked up as the door opened. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and glasses perched low on her nose. Her name tag read, Marlene. She took in Jack's jacket, the weathered look of him, then her gaze dropped to Bevgy. "Well," she said, softening immediately, "aren't you handsome?" Bevgy sat politely at Jack's side, tail still. "He's well behaved," Jack said. "Won't be in the way." Marlene waved a hand. "Long as he doesn't order pancakes?" Jack nodded. "No promises." They took a booth near the wall. Jack slid into the seat, stretching his legs slightly. Bevgy lay down beside him, head resting on his paws, eyes tracking the room without tension. Jack ordered coffee and eggs. For Bevgy, just water. As Marlene walked away, Jack leaned back and let the warmth sink into his bones. This was one of the few places that didn't make his chest tighten. Emily spent the morning shelving books. The Ridgeway Public Library wasn't large, but it was well loved. The shelves were worn smooth at the edges, the carpet threadbare in places where people paused to browse. The building smelled like paper and dust, and the faint sweetness of cleaning spray. Emily liked it here. She liked the quiet order of things. The way books waited patiently to be found. The way stories stayed exactly where you left them, no matter how messy life became outside. She pushed a cart down the aisle, sliding books into place, when Mrs. Lang appeared beside her. Mrs. Lang was in her early 40s, tall and always dressed a little too formally for the job. She had kind eyes but a perpetually worried expression, as if she was bracing for bad news. "Emily," she said gently, "do you have a minute?" Emily's stomach tightened. "Of course." They stepped into the small office near the back. Mrs. Lang closed the door. "I wanted to let you know," she began, "that the city finalized next month's budget." Emily nodded slowly. "They're cutting part-time hours again," Mrs. Lang continued. "I tried to argue for keeping your schedule, but—" "It's okay," Emily said quickly, forcing a smile. "I understand." Mrs. Lang sighed. "You're one of our best, Emily. This isn't about performance." "I know." They stood there for a moment, both aware of what wasn't being said. "I'll figure something out," Emily added, more to herself than anyone else. Mrs. Lang reached out and squeezed her arm. "I know you will." As Emily returned to her cart, her hands shook just enough that she had to pause and steady them against the shelf. She thought of the envelope labeled "School" in her coat pocket, thought of Noah's blue notebook, thought of the biker with the calm eyes and the dog who felt like he could see through walls. Jack finished his coffee and sat quietly. Across from him, Bevgy lifted his head slightly, ears angling toward the door. Jack followed his gaze. Emily stepped inside, brushing snowflakes from her coat. She looked surprised to see him. "Oh," she said again, that word becoming familiar between them. "Hi." Jack nodded. "Morning." Marlene appeared instantly. "Friend of yours?" Emily hesitated. "We met." "That counts," Marlene said cheerfully, grabbing a menu. "Sit." Emily slid into the booth across from Jack. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily laughed softly. "This is unexpected." "Yeah," Jack agreed. "Most good things are." Emily ordered soup and tea. As they waited, Jack noticed the way her shoulders sagged slightly now that she was sitting, the way tiredness crept in when she wasn't actively doing something. "You okay?" he asked. Emily considered lying. Instead, she shook her head. "Not really." Jack nodded, as if that answer made more sense than any other. They sat in companionable silence until the food arrived. Bevgy shifted slightly as Emily placed her bag under the table, his nose brushing the fabric. He sniffed once, then settled. "He likes you," Jack said. Emily smiled faintly. "I'm honored." After a few bites, Emily spoke again. "You ever feel like you're doing everything right and still falling behind?" Jack set his fork down carefully. "Yes." He didn't elaborate. She didn't ask him to. "That dog," Emily said after a moment, nodding toward Bevgy. "He helps, doesn't he?" Jack looked down at Bevgy. "He reminds me where I am." Emily studied Jack's face. "You mean, not somewhere else?" Jack met her gaze. "Yeah." The word hung between them, heavy but honest. "I brought back a lot of things from over there," Jack continued quietly. "Some useful, some not." Emily didn't interrupt. "Bevgy learned how to pull me out of my head," he said. "Sit, breathe, pay attention." Emily nodded slowly. "I think Noah does that for me." Jack smiled, real this time. "Kids are good at it." They finished their meals. Outside, the clouds hung low over Ridgeway, but the diner felt like a pocket of calm carved out of the day. As they stood to leave, Emily hesitated. "Jack?" "Yeah?" "I don't know what today would have felt like without yesterday," she said. "So, thank you. Again." Jack shrugged lightly. "Sometimes showing up is enough." Bevgy stood, tail wagging once. As they stepped back into the cold, Jack realized something quietly important. The noise in his head, the constant background static, had dimmed. Not gone, just quieter, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to ride until it disappeared. By midweek, Ridgeway felt heavier. The sky stayed low and colorless, pressing down on the town like a lid that refused to lift. Snow never quite fell, but the cold lingered, damp and insistent, seeping into cracks in sidewalks and bones alike. The kind of cold that didn't announce itself loudly, it just stayed, patient and exhausting. Jack felt it the moment he turned the key. The Harley coughed once, twice, then went quiet. Jack frowned slightly, listening. He tried again. The engine turned over, slower this time, struggling like it was thinking better of the effort. Bevgy sat behind him, still imbalanced, ears flicking at the unfamiliar sound. "Yeah," Jack murmured. "I hear it too." He swung off the bike and knelt, one gloved hand resting on the cold metal of the engine casing. The smell hit him next. Oil, sharp and wrong. Not catastrophic, not yet, but enough to matter. Jack closed his eyes briefly. The bike wasn't just transportation, it was work. It was how he moved through the world. Without it, everything narrowed. Jobs, options, days. He stood slowly and rolled the Harley to the curb, breath puffing white in the air. Bevgy hopped down neatly, staying close, watching Jack's face more than the bike. "Yeah, I know," Jack said quietly. "We'll figure it out." He always said that. Sometimes it was true. Emily noticed the cold most when she stopped moving. The library had been quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that came with budget cuts and shorter hours. Fewer patrons, fewer lights on, less heat. She finished shelving early and checked the clock, already knowing what it would say. "Emily," Mrs. Lang called gently from the desk, "you can head out." Emily nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks." She gathered her things and stepped outside, pulling her coat tighter around her. The wind cut through immediately, stealing what warmth she had left. She walked the familiar route toward Noah's school, her thoughts circling numbers she didn't like thinking about. Rent, groceries, school supplies, heating. She reached the corner and stopped short. Jack stood there, helmet under his arm, the Harley parked awkwardly at the curb. Emily's heart sank a little. "Is everything okay?" Jack hesitated just a beat too long. "Bike's acting up." "Oh," she said softly. "That's bad timing." He nodded. "Story of my life." They walked together in silence for a few steps. Bevgy trotted between them, tail level, unbothered by the tension he clearly sensed. "I was going to ask," Emily said carefully, "if you wanted to come by tonight. I was making soup, nothing fancy." Jack almost said no. Habit pulled at him, the instinct to keep distance, to not become part of something that could need him. But then he looked at Emily, at the way she held herself together through sheer will, at Bevgy, who had already decided this mattered. "I'd like that," Jack said. Emily smiled, relief flickering across her face. "Good. Noah will be excited." Jack felt something tighten in his chest. The soup was simple. Chicken broth, carrots, noodles. Emily stirred it slowly, the steam fogging the small kitchen windows. The house was modest but clean, warmed by a space heater that hummed steadily in the corner. Noah sat at the table, coloring carefully within the lines. Bevgy lay near his feet, patient and still, allowing Noah to rest one socked foot against his side. "He's warm," Noah said seriously. "He is," Emily agreed. "He's helping." Jack leaned against the counter, watching the scene unfold like something he hadn't expected to see himself in. Domestic, ordinary, real. The heater sputtered once, then again, then stopped. Emily froze. "No," she whispered. Jack moved instantly, crossing the room and crouching beside the unit. He checked the plug, the switch, the outlet. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "Probably just overheated." Emily nodded, though her eyes betrayed her concern. Jack reset the unit. It hummed back to life, weaker than before. "That'll hold for now," he said, "but it's old." Emily exhaled slowly. "Everything is." They ate in relative quiet. The soup warmed them, but the edges of the room still felt cold. Afterward, Jack helped Noah with a puzzle while Emily cleaned. The simplicity of it all made Jack feel unsteady, like standing on ice that might crack if he shifted his weight too suddenly. Later, as Noah got ready for bed, Emily walked Jack to the door. "I'm sorry about the bike," she said. "If there's anything—" Jack shook his head. "I'll handle it." She nodded, respecting the boundary even if she didn't like it. As Jack stepped out into the night, the cold hit him harder than before. The Harley sat dark and silent at the curb. Bevgy looked at him, We're walking, Jack said. They walked to the mile home together. Jack's breath came steady, controlled. His mind, less so. Without the bike, tomorrow looked complicated. Missed days, lost pay, no room for error. He stopped once, resting his hand on a fence, staring at nothing. Bevgy pressed his side against Jack's leg. I know, Jack said quietly. I know. When they reached the house, Jack didn't turn on the lights right away. He sat at the table, head in his hands, the weight of the week settling fully onto his shoulders. He thought of Emily's heater, of Noah's careful coloring, of the way Bevgy stayed close without needing to be told. Jack stood and opened the small toolbox under the sink. He worked late into the night. Morning came gray and slow. Jack woke stiff, hands smelling faintly of oil. He dressed quickly and checked his phone. 2 missed calls from a job he couldn't get to. He exhaled sharply. Across town, Emily stared at her bank balance, the numbers refusing to change no matter how many times she refreshed the screen. She packed Noah's lunch carefully, each item chosen, with quiet calculation. At the door, Noah hugged Bevgy goodbye. Take care of Jack, he said solemnly. Bevgy's tail thumped. Emily watched them leave, a knot forming in her chest. She didn't know it yet, but the hard part wasn't beginning. It had already begun. The cold didn't leave Ridgeway after a single bad night. It lingered. It crept into mornings and settled there, quiet and persistent, turning breath into fog and sidewalks into slick ribbons of ice. The town moved slower under it. People spoke less. Doors stayed closed longer. Jack noticed the quiet first. Without the Harley, his days stretched awkwardly. He woke before dawn out of habit, reaching for keys that weren't there. The house felt smaller, without the familiar vibration of the engine, like a room missing its pulse. Bevgy noticed it too. He followed Jack from room to room that morning, not crowding him, just staying within reach. When Jack sat at the kitchen table staring at the same cup of coffee long after it had gone cold, Bevgy rested his chin on Jack's knee and stayed there. Yeah, Jack said softly. I know. He checked his phone again. No new messages, no new work. Jack stood and pulled on his jacket. Come on, he said. We'll walk. They stepped outside into the brittle air. Frost clung to the edges of fences and mailboxes. The sky was pale and thin, like it hadn't fully decided whether to wake up. Jack didn't head toward town. He headed toward Emily's street. Emily was already awake. She had learned long ago that mornings were easier if she stayed ahead of them. If she let herself sit too long, the weight of everything waiting would press down harder. She moved quietly through the kitchen, packing Noah's lunch. Soup in a thermos, an apple cut into neat slices, a folded note tucked carefully into the side pocket of his backpack. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Emily glanced at the heater. It hummed, weak but functional. She made a mental note to keep it on low all day. Noah shuffled in, hair sticking up at odd angles. Is it a school day? He asked hopefully. Yes, Emily said, smiling, and a good one. He accepted this answer without argument. There was a knock at the door. Emily froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened it cautiously and smiled in surprise when she saw Jack standing there, Bevgy sitting patiently at his side. Morning, Jack said. Morning, Emily replied. Everything okay? Jack nodded. Bike's still down. Thought I'd walk Noah with you, if that's all right. Emily hesitated only a moment. I'd like that. Noah appeared behind her and lit up instantly. Bevgy! Bevguy's tail wagged once, deliberate and calm. They walked together, the cold biting at their cheeks, but softened by shared company. Noah talked about school projects and dinosaurs, and a book he wanted to read again even though he already knew how it ended. Jack listened. Emily watched them both, something warm and unfamiliar settling in her chest. The days began to find a rhythm. Jack spent his mornings helping where he could. He fixed a loose step on Emily's porch with borrowed tools, replaced a flickering light bulb in the hallway. Small things, necessary things. He didn't offer money. Emily didn't ask. Instead, she cooked. Soup, stew, simple meals stretched carefully to last. Jack ate slowly, gratefully, always insisting on helping clean up. Bevguy became a constant presence. He lay near Noah while the boy did homework, his steady breathing filling the quiet spaces. He followed Emily from room to room, never underfoot, always aware. At night, he curled up near the heater, one eye open until the house settled into sleep. He's like a guard, Emily said one evening. Jack shook his head. He's a reminder. Emily tilted her head. Of what? That you're not alone. She didn't respond, but the words stayed with her. On the third day, Jack finally admitted the truth. The Harley wasn't a quick fix. He stood in Emily's kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone untouched. Parts cost more than I thought, he said quietly, and without it, I'm missing work. Emily leaned against the counter, listening. How long? Jack exhaled. Long enough? She nodded slowly. Then we adjust. Jack looked up. We? Emily met his gaze. You're here. We eat together. You walk Noah to school. That's not nothing. Jack swallowed. I don't want to be a burden, he said. Emily's voice was steady. You're not. Bevji shifted, placing himself between them as if to anchor the moment. Jack reached down and scratched behind his ears. He agrees. Emily smiled faintly. He usually does. That afternoon, Emily received an email. She sat at the small desk in the living room, laptop balanced precariously on a stack of books. Her heart sank as she read the subject line. Updated work schedule, effective immediately. She didn't open it right away. She already knew. When she did, the words blurred together, but the meaning was clear enough. More hours cut, fewer shifts, temporary, they said. Emily closed the laptop and pressed her palms flat against the desk. Jack noticed immediately. He didn't ask questions. He simply moved closer, sat on the edge of the couch, and waited. Emily finally spoke. They cut me again. Jack nodded. I'm sorry. She laughed softly, humorless. I keep thinking if I do everything right, it'll even out. Jack leaned forward slightly. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just takes longer than feels fair. Emily looked at him. How do you know? Jack thought of long nights, of silence that pressed in on his chest, of Bevgi pulling him back with a nudge or a look. I've had practice, he said. Emily closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. That night, the heater failed completely. Emily noticed it when the house grew too quiet. She checked the thermostat. Nothing. No, she whispered. Jack was already moving. He crouched by the unit, listening, adjusting, trying everything he could without tools or parts he didn't have. The heater clicked once, then stayed silent. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. I'm sorry, she said. I know it's cold. Jack stood. We'll make it work. He gathered blankets, pulled the couch closer to the heater, lit the oven briefly for warmth before turning it off again, careful and deliberate. Bevgi moved to Noah's side, pressing his body against the boy's legs. He's warm, Noah murmured sleepily. Yes, Emily said, her voice thick. He is. They sat together in the living room, wrapped in layers, the house dim except for a single lamp. Jack stared at the floor. I should go, he said quietly. You don't need another problem. Emily shook her head immediately. You're not leaving. Jack looked at her. This is hard, she continued. All of it. But it's harder alone. Jack's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Later, after Noah had fallen asleep, Emily found Jack sitting at the table, head bowed slightly. You okay? She asked. Jack didn't answer right away. I forget sometimes, he said finally, that staying is harder than leaving. Emily pulled out a chair and sat across from him. I forget that asking for help doesn't mean failing. They sat there, quiet, understanding passing between them without needing explanation. Bevgi lay at their feet, breathing slow and even. For the first time in days, the house felt held together, not by heat or money or certainty, but by something sturdier, commitment, not to fixing everything, just to staying. The cold didn't break overnight. It lingered into the next morning, settling into Ridgeway with a quiet stubbornness that felt personal. The house was colder than it had been the night before, the kind of cold that made floors unforgiving and air sharp in the lungs. Emily woke early, pulled on a sweater, and stood still for a moment in the kitchen, listening. No hum from the heater. She exhaled slowly and moved on. Noah slept curled tightly under blankets in the living room, one arm draped over Bevgi's broad back. The dog remained motionless, breathing slow and steady, warmth offered without condition. Emily paused in the doorway, watching them, then turned back to the counter to make breakfast with what she had. Oatmeal, toast, nothing fancy. Jack sat at the table, jacket already on, hands wrapped around a mug that didn't warm him much. He looked tired in a way that wasn't just physical, the kind that came from doing the math in your head and knowing it didn't add up. I'm going to take a look at the bike again, he said quietly. Emily nodded. Let me know if you need anything. Jack almost laughed at that. Instead, he nodded back. Bevgi lifted his head, ears alert. Stay, Jack told him gently. Bevgi hesitated, then obeyed, settling back beside Noah. Jack stepped out into the morning alone. The garage was 2 blocks away. Not really a garage, more like a converted warehouse with a roll-up door that groaned when it opened, and a hand-painted sign that read Hollis Auto and Fabrication. Jack had walked past it 100 times, always meaning to stop, always deciding he didn't need to. Today, he did. The door was open, letting out a wave of warmer air that smelled like oil, metal, and something burnt. Inside, a man in his early 50s leaned over an engine bay, sleeves rolled up, hands blackened with grease. He was thick through the shoulders, hair shaved close to the scalp, movements precise and unhurried. Jack recognized him immediately. Tom Hollis, Jack said. The man straightened slowly and turned. Well, I'll be damned, Tom said, squinting before his face broke into a grin. Jack Miller. They shook hands, firm and familiar. Haven't seen you in a while, Tom said. Jack nodded. Been keeping my head down. Tom gestured toward the open space inside. What brings you in? Bike's down, Jack said. And so am I, if I'm honest. Tom studied him for a moment, then nodded. Bring it over. Jack hesitated. I don't know if I can afford... Didn't ask that, Tom said simply. Bring it over. Jack swallowed and nodded. Emily spent the late morning making phone calls. She sat at the small desk again, notebook open, pen tapping softly against the page. Utility company, landlord, school office. Each call took something out of her, not because people were unkind, but because kindness didn't lower bills. She paused when the phone rang unexpectedly. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. Hello, she said finally. Hi, is this Emily Carter? A woman's voice asked. Professional, warm. Yes, this is Dana from the Ridgeway Community Learning Fund. Mrs. Lang forwarded your information. Emily's heart skipped. Oh, we have a small education assistance program, Dana continued. Nothing immediate, but I wanted to talk about options. Emily closed her eyes. Yes, she said. Please. They talked for 15 minutes. No promises, no guarantees, just possibilities. When the call ended, Emily sat very still. It wasn't a solution, but it was a door. Jack pushed the Harley into Hollis Auto just after noon. Tom circled the bike slowly, hands on hips. She's seen better days, Jack smiled faintly. So have I. Tom crouched, checked the engine, listened, frowned. Fuel pump's failing, wiring's tired, not surprised. Jack nodded. What'll it cost? Tom scratched his chin. Parts aren't cheap, labor's worse. Jack exhaled. Tom looked at him. You still good with engines? Jack blinked. Yeah? Tom straightened. I could use help. Short term, cash work. You help me get through this backlog. I help you get this thing running. Jack stared at him. No charity, Tom added. Work. Jack nodded slowly. I can do that. I know you can. By evening, Jack returned to Emily's house smelling like oil and metal, shoulders aching in a way that felt earned. Bev Guy met him at the door, tail wagging once, then pressed close. You're late, Emily said, but she was smiling. Found something, Jack replied. They sat at the table while Noah colored quietly nearby. A job? Emily asked. Jack nodded. Temporary, helps with the bike, helps with everything. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That's good. Really good. She hesitated. I heard from a fund today. For Noah. It's not certain, but it's something, Jack finished. They shared a look. Not relief, but momentum. That night, the house was still cold, but it didn't feel empty. Jack fixed what he could. Emily planned what she could. Bevgi lay between them, steady and present. No one pretended everything was fine, but no one was alone anymore. Outside, Ridgeway remained gray and stubborn. Inside, something had shifted. Not hope, something quieter, stability. Christmas didn't arrive in Ridgeway all at once. It came in pieces, in the extra lights strung across Main Street, in the grocery store aisle where canned soup went on sale, and people lingered longer than usual, in the way strangers nodded at each other like they shared something unspoken. The snow finally came 2 days before Christmas Eve. Not heavy, not dramatic, just enough to soften the town's sharp edges. Jack noticed it first thing in the morning, when he stepped outside and the world looked muted, like someone had turned the volume down. The Harley was still at Hollis Auto, half disassembled, but Jack didn't mind as much anymore. His hands were busy. His days had shape again. He brushed snow off his jacket and walked toward Emily's house. Bevgy padded beside him, leaving clean, even tracks in the fresh powder. Emily was stringing lights when they arrived. They weren't fancy, just a single strand of warm white bulbs she'd found at a discount store. But she hung them carefully along the porch railing, fingers stiff from the cold. "Hold that end," she said when she saw Jack. Jack took the strand without comment, steadying it while she secured the last clip. Bevgy sat back, head tilted upward, watching the lights blink on one by one. "They look good," Jack said. Emily stepped back, arms crossed, and smiled. "They do." Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and toast. Noah sat at the table, working on a paper chain, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. "Jack," he said without looking up, "what do you think comes after green?" Jack considered. "Red's traditional." Noah nodded seriously and added a red loop. Emily watched them, something warm tightening behind her ribs. This was what she hadn't dared imagine. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. Emily answered it in the kitchen, her back to Jack. "Yes," she said. "I understand." She listened quietly, nodding, her shoulders slowly tensing. When she hung up, she didn't turn around right away. Jack waited. "They approved part of the funding," Emily said finally. "Not all of it. Enough for the semester. But after that," her voice trailed off. Jack nodded. "That's still something." Emily pressed her palms flat against the counter. "It means next year is still a question mark." Jack stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Most things are." She laughed softly, then sighed. "I just wanted this one thing to feel settled." Jack looked at Noah, humming to himself as he looped paper together, Bevgy's tail thumping gently against the chair leg. "It feels settled," Jack said quietly. "Right now." Emily turned to face him. Their eyes met, and for a moment the rest of the house seemed to fade. She looked away first. That evening they walked to the town square. The Christmas tree stood tall in the center, lights glowing softly against the falling snow. A small crowd had gathered, families, bundled in coats, kids tugging on mittens, older couples standing shoulder to shoulder. Noah held Emily's hand on one side and Jack's glove on the other. Bevgy walked just ahead, alert but relaxed, weaving naturally around people's legs. Music drifted through the air, carols played by a local brass group, imperfect but earnest. "This is my favorite part," Noah said, "when everyone stops being in a hurry." Jack smiled at that. They stood together as the mayor spoke briefly, words mostly lost to the cold and distance. When the lights brightened fully, the crowd cheered softly, like they didn't want to break the moment. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. Jack noticed. He didn't say anything. He just shifted slightly closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth through his coat. Bevgy sat at their feet, looking up at the lights as if he understood their significance. That night, after Noah fell asleep clutching his paper chain, Emily sat at the table with bills spread out in front of her. Jack washed dishes quietly, listening. "You don't have to stay," Emily said suddenly. Jack turned off the tap. "I know." She didn't look up. "I mean, this. Us. I don't want you to feel stuck." Jack dried his hands slowly. "I don't." She finally met his gaze. "You could leave. You could go back to writing, to keeping things simple." Jack leaned against the counter. "Simple's overrated." Emily swallowed. "I'm scared." Jack nodded. "Me too." They sat in silence for a while, the house creaking softly around them. "I don't know what this is," Emily said, "but I know it matters." Jack reached across the table, resting his hand near hers, not touching, but close enough to feel the intent. "Then we don't rush it," he said. "We let it be what it is." Emily nodded slowly. Bevgy lifted his head from the floor, eyes moving between them, tail tapping once. On Christmas Eve morning, snow covered Ridgeway completely. The town moved gently, like it had agreed to take the day slow. Jack returned from the garage with grease-stained hands and a tired smile. "She'll run," he said, referring to the Harley. "Not perfect, but steady." Emily smiled. "That's kind of our theme." They spent the day quietly, baking cookies, wrapping small gifts, hanging Noah's paper chains around the living room. As evening fell, Emily handed Jack a small box. "You didn't have to," he said immediately. "I wanted to," she replied. Inside was a simple knit scarf, dark blue and uneven in places. "I made it," she added, embarrassed. "It's not—" Jack wrapped it around his neck without hesitation. "It's perfect." Later, Noah presented Bevguy with a handmade collar tag cut from cardboard and covered in glitter. "It says his name," Noah explained proudly. Bevguy accepted it solemnly, tail wagging. Emily laughed through tears. That night, as the snow continued to fall, Jack stood on the porch alone for a moment. The house glowed warmly behind him. Inside, Emily moved quietly, humming under her breath. Noah slept peacefully. Jack breathed in the cold air and felt, for the first time in years, that the noise in his head had faded into something manageable. Not gone, but quiet enough. He went back inside. Christmas was here, and he wasn't alone to meet it. Christmas morning arrived quietly. No trumpets, no sudden brightness, just a pale winter sun pushing through thin clouds, turning the snow outside into something soft and almost forgiving. Ridgeway looked smaller that morning, as if the town itself had decided to take a step back and let its people breathe. Jack woke before anyone else. It was instinct more than habit. Years of waking early, of checking surroundings, of listening for things that never quite happened anymore. He lay still for a moment on the couch, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the familiar tension to tighten his chest. It didn't. The house was quiet in a good way. From the kitchen came the faint smell of coffee. From the other room, the slow, even breathing of a sleeping child. Bevguy lay stretched out on the rug nearby, one ear flicking when Jack shifted, eyes opening briefly to confirm everything was as it should be. Jack sat up and rubbed a hand over his face. "Well," he murmured, almost to himself. "That's new." Bevguy's tail tapped once against the floor. Emily stood at the stove in thick socks and an old sweater, carefully flipping pancakes. The radio played softly in the background, some holiday song she half remembered from childhood. She hadn't slept much, not from worry this time, but from the unfamiliar feeling of anticipation. She heard Jack move behind her. "Morning," she said, not turning around. "Morning," he replied. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled. "Coffee's fresh." Jack poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter, watching her. She moved easily in the kitchen now, no longer stiff with tension, no longer bracing herself for the next thing to go wrong. It struck him how much lighter she looked when she wasn't carrying everything alone. Noah appeared in the doorway moments later, hair sticking up wildly, eyes bright. "Is it Christmas?" he asked, as if checking. Emily laughed. "It is." Noah grinned and ran toward the small tree in the corner of the living room. The presents beneath it were few and modest, wrapped carefully, chosen thoughtfully. He stopped short when he noticed Bevguy sitting upright beside the tree, posture serious, tail tucked neatly around his paws. "Is he guarding the presents?" Noah whispered. Jack smiled. "Always." Bevguy remained perfectly still. Noah nodded approvingly. They opened gifts slowly. Emily watched Noah more than the presents themselves, memorizing the way his face lit up over simple things. A book, a set of colored pencils, a scarf she'd knitted too loosely, but with great care. When he handed Jack a small, unevenly wrapped package, Jack hesitated. "You didn't have to," he said. "I wanted to," Noah insisted. Inside was a keychain shaped like a motorcycle, cheap plastic, but solid. Jack closed his fingers around it, throat tightening unexpectedly. "Thank you," he said quietly. Bevguy received a new collar, simple leather, sturdy, with a small, metal tag engraved neatly, Bev-G. Emily's phone number was etched beneath. Jack stared at it longer than necessary. "That's thoughtful," he said. Emily shrugged. "In case he ever gets lost." Bevguy sat very still as Jack fastened the collar around his neck. When it clicked into place, the dog leaned forward and pressed his forehead briefly against Jack's knee. Jack swallowed hard. Later, while Noah built something elaborate on the floor, Emily and Jack sat at the table with papers spread between them. Not bills this time, plans. The community fund paperwork lay open, alongside a handwritten note from Dana confirming continued support if Emily re-enrolled Noah in the spring program. It wasn't guaranteed forever, but it was stable enough to breathe. Jack added his own piece to the pile. Tom Hollis had offered him a more permanent position at the garage. Not glamorous, not easy, but steady. Honest work. Enough to keep the Harley running and the lights on. Emily traced the edge of the paper with her finger. "That's really good, Jack." He nodded. "Yeah." There was a pause. "Does that change things?" Emily asked quietly. Jack considered the question carefully. "I think it makes them real." Emily met his gaze. "And you're okay with that?" Jack smiled, slow and certain. "I am." She nodded, relief flickering across her face. "So am I." That afternoon, Jack stepped outside alone. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he walked to the end of the driveway. The Harley sat there now, cleaned and repaired, looking older but reliable, like it had earned its place back. Jack rested a hand on the seat and breathed in the cold air. For years, riding had meant escape, movement, distance from places that felt too heavy to stay in. Now, for the first time, the bike felt like something else. Transportation. A way back. Emily opened the door behind him. "You heading out?" Jack shook his head. "Just checking." She stepped closer, standing beside him. "You don't have to go." "I know," he said. They stood together for a moment, watching the quiet street. "I've been thinking," Emily said carefully, "about what you said. About staying being harder than leaving." Jack nodded. "I think I'm ready for the hard part," she continued. Jack turned to face her fully. "Me too." He reached out, resting his hand gently over hers. Not urgent, not dramatic, just present. Bevgy appeared behind them, sitting down heavily at their feet, as if claiming the moment. Emily laughed softly. "I think he approves." Jack smiled. "He's got good instincts." As evening settled in, they took a walk through the neighborhood. Lights glowed from windows. Laughter drifted faintly through the cold air. Ridgeway felt gentler than it had in weeks, maybe because they were seeing it through different eyes now. Noah walked ahead, kicking at snow, Bevgy trotting beside him like a quiet shadow. Emily slipped her arm through Jack's. He noticed. He didn't pull away. "I don't know what the future looks like," she said softly. Jack squeezed her hand. "Neither do I." She smiled. "But I know what today looks like." Jack nodded. "That's usually enough." That night, after Noah was asleep and the house had settled into its familiar creaks and sighs, Jack lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling again. This time, when he listened, there was no noise to quiet, just the sound of a home being lived in. Bevgy lay nearby, breathing slow and even, collar tag catching the light from the hallway. Jack closed his eyes. For the first time in a very long while, he wasn't waiting for the next thing to break. He was already where he needed to be. And when he finally drifted off to sleep, it wasn't with thoughts of escape or survival, but with the simple certainty that tomorrow, no matter what it brought, there was a place he would come back to. Sometimes, they arrive as someone who chooses to stay when walking away would be easier. Maybe that's how God works in our everyday lives. Not by removing every hardship, but by sending the right people at the right moment. If this story touched your heart, remember, you are not forgotten, and you may be someone else's miracle too. Please share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and write Amen if you believe in God's protection and new beginnings. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith and healing. May God bless you, keep you safe, and walk with you through every season of your life.